Welcome to First Fruits Coffee. My name is Dan. Today we are going through the plunger, or if you're a bit fancy, the French press. Basically, every Australian household has a plunger. It is quick, it is easy, and it is cheap. At First Fruits Coffee, we roast our coffee light. A couple of reasons. One is we want you to taste what the coffee tastes like, not what we can do to it. When we roast our coffee light, coffee is the seed of a tree. You can actually taste what the fruit used to taste like. That is hugely a part of what we do. We want to highlight what the farmers have done and how they have had generations looking after the trees on the farms. We want to highlight what they've done to the coffee, not what we've done as a roaster. With lighter roasted coffee, there's a couple of things going to happen when we extract it. Firstly, we think it's going to taste better. It's going to be a lot sweeter. You're going to be able to taste the fruity flavors that come through the coffee. The other thing is, especially when making plunger and we put water into the ground coffee and it all floats at the beginning, usually it'll sink down to the bottom. Lighter roasted coffee is denser, it's heavier, it'll sink down a bit quicker, which means that we've just got to tweak how we make our French press or our plunger to make sure that we're going to get it correct. The biggest issue that we have in making a plunger is what we're going to call the sludge. It's basically the bits of ground coffee that are going to stay in the liquid that we're going to drink. Usually when we're making coffee, we're going to filter it in some way, whether it's an espresso machine or whether it is a pour over. There's some kind of filtration, otherwise you're going to be eating the grounds. And that's gross, that's not what we want to do. The sludge is something that'll come through a bit more in a plunger, but there is a couple of things that we can do to make sure that it's cleaner and it doesn't come through into that cup. And sludge is gross. I mean, even the word sludge doesn't sound very good, right? I don't want to put sludge in my mouth. I'm sure you don't either. Oh my goodness. Now, a plunger has a metal filter, which is good because it means that we can reuse it over and over and over again without any extra cost. The issue is that particles that are a little bit bigger than normal can get through the gaps in the plunger where something like a paper filter would stop them, which means that we need to be careful how we make our plungers so that we don't get all those particles coming through, which is the sludge. Grind size. When we are looking at grind size for plunger, it's going to be a bit coarser than usual, a bit coarser than a pour over. If you haven't made a pour over, it's not going to mean a lot to you. How it works is quite fine. On the other end of the scale is Turkish coffee, then after that is espresso. When we kind of get through to cold brew, we get through to filter coffee. Plunger is on the coarser side of that window, but it's not ridiculous. We don't want to have giant boulders in there because it's not going to extract the coffee correctly. If you have the type of grinder that has the round part you put the coffee in, that's not a great grinder. There's not much that we can control when we're doing that. You can tap it a certain amount of times, we've tried, but the inconsistencies between it are incredible. It's going to do if you can't get anything else, but absolutely invest in not something ridiculous. Usually a second-hand grinder or something like that is going to do far better than the ones that you tap. Absolutely invest in a good grinder because it's going to make the extractions taste so much better. Water. Two things with water. We're going to talk about water temperature and we're going to talk about the quality of our water. Temperature, we're looking 93 to 96, 97 degrees. If you don't have a variable kettle, what you can do is just boil your kettle, let it sit for 2 minutes off the boil and then pour it in. The basic premises with water temperature is the lighter the roast, the hotter the water can go. The hotter the water, the more is going to extract from the coffee. Lighter roast, we can extract more because there's a bit more quality in there usually, and so we can extract a bit more out of it, where a darker roast can have a bit of a lower quality. Now, our water quality is super important. If we get it out of the tap, we're going to have no idea what density that water is, what the TDS is, where you want to make sure that our water is going to be good. If you can grab some water from the shop, there's some distilled water. In another video, we've added a bit of bicarb soda and some Epsom salts back into it just to control how much is in there. That'll help us remove a variable. Yeah, it's all about controlling these variables because you'll make coffee one day and you'll go, oh my goodness, that was delicious. And you'll try and replicate it the next day and it won't be. And as far as you can see, you've done all the same things, but it hasn't come out the same. These variables are the things that we can control to make sure that it's going to taste good each time. When we make a coffee, like every other video we've made, dose, yield, and time. Our dose is the weight of coffee in grams that goes into the coffee making device. The yield is how much water goes in, and the time is the total time it takes to happen. For this recipe, we're going to use a ratio of 1:16, meaning that for every 1 part of coffee, we're going to have 16 parts of water. Our coffee's going to go in, and then we're going to pour our water in. There's not a huge deal of differences depending on how we pour the water in. Just get it in, fill it up to the right amount, and it should be fine. In our regular size plungers, we're going to use about 800 mils of water, which means that we're going to put a dose of 50 grams. So we put our dose, 50, we've got our yield, 800. Now we're going to talk about our time. So our time, right, we're going to fill the water up, we're going to let it sit for 4 minutes. This is going to allow our coffee to extract, and then, depending on how much time you have, we're going to do one of two different things. If you don't have as much time, or you kind of couldn't be bothered, from there you can just put the lid straight on your plunger and slowly push it down. If you want your plunger to taste exceptional and you don't want your coffee sludge, what we're going to do is scoop any of the grounds remaining off the top, and then we're going to let it sit for another 4 minutes. This is going to enable all of the particles that may be in the liquid to sink down to the bottom, and then we can tip them out rather than trying to push the metal filter through them. As slowly as we can, we are going to put the lid back on. Actually, you don't have to do that super slowly. Put the lid back on quickly, but then we're going to slowly press it down so that we don't have any of the particles rushing around the side or getting through them or coming out in some different way. We want to slowly push it down until we get close to the top of the bed, and then we're going to stop it. We don't want to keep on pressing it on top of the bed because it's going to agitate the coffee and extract more. You might get some bitter flavors come out, but as close as you can to the bottom so we have as clean a liquid on top as we possibly can. So with this method of plunger, you're still going to get a little bit of sediment in the coffee. There's really nothing that you can do about that without the aid of some other kind of filtration, whether it's paper, whether it's cloth. There's going to be a bit of sediment that comes through. It's just the nature of the plunger. Unless you only take the top part off, and then you're kind of wasting a lot. We don't really want to do that. It still means that you're going to have a great cup of coffee. We evaluate coffee if we're testing a roast that we've done, or if we're purchasing green coffee in order to put it into our stores. We're going to do a method of coffee drinking called cupping, which is how we evaluate the coffee. The plunger is as close as you can get to replicating the flavor of cupping coffee, which is actually fantastic. It's one of my favorite ways to drink coffee is through cupping, which means that we can really taste exactly what that coffee tastes like without altering it through the filtration. We can really get such a good sense of everything that's in there, and then we can use that to adjust it later. If you are wanting a complete, clean, sludge-free beverage, you're probably going to have to move to one of the other filter devices usually with a paper filter. I mean, there's some other good things coming out now with different kinds of filtration. Paper is tested, it is true. We can get exceptional coffee through a paper filter. There is a method where you can use the plunger with some paper on it. I was going to include it in, but if we're using filter paper, we're kind of better off just moving to a different device rather than trying to incorporate it into this. The plunger sits if you're going camping or if you're at somebody's house and you've got some coffee and you just wanted to make something. It's not the best coffee device ever. It's still decent. You can absolutely get away with using it if you didn't have anything else. But if we're going to use paper filters and things like that, it's probably worth just moving to a separate device, like a V60 or some other kind of device with a paper filter. Thank you for watching. We are super excited with the amount of interest we've got on these videos. We're going to keep on doing them as much as we can. We want to help educate you to be able to make coffee good at home, because that is hugely what we're about. If you could subscribe and put the notifications on, as well as watch other videos that we've released, it actually helps us to be able to be seen a lot more. It'd be fantastic if you could do that. Thanks for watching.